The Seiko SKX015 Pepsi bezel. This is a watch that I recently had quite an interest in. I was wondering why it is so hard to find and what are the differences between this and the famous brother, the SKX013, which we have here. Other than the bezel, of course. Questions like, what is this watch? Does it still exist? And how do you spot one? Now, this is a watch that if you have right now, you should be proud of, because I honestly cannot find much information about this. But since we know for a fact that the SKX013 was released in 1996, it might have been released during that point in time, given that the SKX013 lasted up to 2018. Somewhere along those lines, the SKX015 just never made it out of the late 90s or the early 2000s. I believe it was made only to that point. Again, if there were more watches of this being posted online, we may be able to check the serial number for reference at least. The SKX015, in essence, is an SKX009 in a 37mm form factor. The SKX009 still thrived up to its discontinuation day. So why did the SKX015 disappear? My guess is, well, at this point all I can give is from what I've learned and seen from watch collecting the SKX013 extensively, as I have several of these. So during the late 90s and the early 2000s, the small case watch trends are slowly changing into larger watches. Big watches above 40mm gain more traction, as watch enthusiasts might have been tired of small vintage watches from the 70s up to the 90s. The majority of the watch sizes before were small. How do I know? Well, you look at military field watches like the GGW113 at 35mm. Those are tiny. The dress watches of, let's say, a vintage Omega Seamaster, hovering at around 36mm. The watches that I collect and have seen that are vintage have a small case size, more or less. I can deduce that most of them have a sub 40mm case size, even some chronographs. So the only logical way we can put it is that it was not a watch that gained traction because small cases or small case watches have a minor fallout during that time. On the other hand, the SKX007 rose into prominence and dominated every wrist, or almost every wrist, of Seiko enthusiasts. The SKX013 gained traction late in the game. This was about the mid or late 2010s that YouTubers began to proclaim that small wristwatches are elite and that you should wear this watch case because you have this wrist size. Well, maybe to some degree there is such a thing that a watch is too big for you or too small. But for them, if it is over 42mm or 40mm, it's a no-no. But I think it's hard to narrow down on just because they tell you what you can and cannot wear. I mean, if you love the look of the watch and you have a small wrist or a big wrist but would like to wear a small watch, or even say maybe a watch company you like makes a specific watch and it is too big for the standards they set, you can't always wish they made a smaller one. Might as well try before even thinking about succumbing to their ideology. I hope that made sense. I mean, watchmaking is kind of an art, and sometimes the artists are going to make flaws and mistakes. Let's just appreciate it while we can, and maybe in the process respect their work. Okay, anyway, enough about that. So the SKX013 is now an attractive watch, but for the SKX015 it is a bit too late. They might have discontinued the SKX015 along the way early on and it never made a comeback. Now all you can find are 2 decades old watches, or even fake ones. Okay, so I have to share this with you guys. I was recently looking for an SKX013 to restore and found a few that I would like to start the project on. As you can see on my previous video that I bought a used SKX013, you can check there. I came across this odd looking SKX013, or what I presumed it to be. This one had no bezel insert to it, so I never really thought of it as anything else. I do notice though that the dial is kinda bluish. I disregarded it because I thought it was just water damage, and color does tend to fade for these old watches. But then I pulled out my other SKX013 and put them side by side and realized that there's really a navy blue finish to the color of the dial. it was really different. It's quite hard to see on the camera, but it is so subtle and hard to identify if you don't have a black dial SKX to compare it to. I was shocked and realized, man, this is the SKX015, but unfortunately with no bezel. The first thing I did was check the dial loom, which let's put a picture here. It is fine, but it is not as damaged as I presumed it to be. It does have some fading there, but it is navy blue, so that's a good sign. The other is the dial if it has a beveled edge on the date window right there. Fakes don't have a strong lasting loom, and mostly don't have a deep beveled edge like that, so keep in mind that. And let's compare to the SKX009, and it is bluish, but it's not that light because it's already faded. As you can see, the indices are yellowish already. And I also have another SKX013 here to compare it to, which is closely dated to it since it has a yellow indices too. And this one is a black one, a black dial, and you can really tell instantly that this is just not an ordinary SKX013. This is an SKX015, and the blue dial is prominent on this one. Forgive my SKX013 here, it has an aftermarket bracelet there. Still have to restore this one. So now that I realized that it is an SKX015, I started searching for a bezel, and for the longest time I couldn't find any bezel for it. The original is just different. The loom pip is deep, similar to this one, which has kind of a shroud that encapsulates it. I'll show you the aftermarket one that I bought. I bought an aftermarket for this one. This is a Pepsi bezel that I bleached and tried to get it as faded as possible, but I just could not agree to it. In camera it looks okay, but in personal it looks terrible. As you can see, the loom pip there, this is an aftermarket loom pip and this is the original. It's deep and it's not overflowing like this one, so at least now you have an idea. So yeah, this is a watch that most people out there take advantage of. They will put an aftermarket bezel insert that is a Pepsi, like this one, then place it on an SKX013 black dial, which I will demonstrate here, and call it an SKX015, which then gives the illusion that it is because you're looking through a camera and you can't really tell if the dial is black or navy blue unless you have the seller compare it to a real black SKX013 dial with much better lighting. Some sellers post it in vague lighting and can deceive you to it. Much better if they have this one to compare. This watch is just rare. Same goes with the SKX017, the orange one, but between the two, I like this one more. So the mystery is still a mystery. Somewhere out there might be a new old stock SKX015 sitting on a drawer. But until then, the best I could do is maybe find a 4205 bezel insert because it's much closer than this one. This one is just plain ugly. And also be careful with that if you really want the original one. Some would sell this SKX015 dial but place the 4205 bezel and claim it as original. So as long as they disclaim it, I think that's good to go, but it's really hard to find an original Pepsi bezel insert for the medium. It is almost close to impossible. Well, at least for online searching, you can't find it anywhere. So yeah, this is just a cool watch, even though Seiko didn't say anything about it being limited edition. This sounds like it is more limited than a limited edition. But yeah, that's just how some watches go. Anyway, that's all for today. If you like these types of videos, please don't forget to click the subscribe button. It just keeps me motivated to make these videos. Till next time, I'll see you soon. Stay safe.